Well, here's an update. I've removed all of the so-called balancing load because it's too complicated. So I just keep the final load that's coming, that the circuit is supposed to power. And that's down here, represented by the two LEDs and the 220 ohm resistor. That's coming from the capacitor loop and the bridge to the short of the electric keeper. But I've inserted a capacitor in between one of the voltage in and in this case it's the aluminum foil shell, which would be the 4 grounding rods equivalent. And that's where the neon bulb is supposed to go. And I put a capacitor in there because I want to, first of all, I want to locate where the neon bulb is supposed to go and remind myself where it's supposed to go. But for the purposes of a sleep circuit, this bionic circuit has to be symmetrical. It has to be balanced. It has to be below overunity. Not below unity, but below overunity. In other words, it has to be unity. It has to be balanced, symmetrical, because that's what the physiology requires when it sleeps at night, is symmetry. Anything else creates, well, what it did for me, it created conditions that felt like a stroke. And I took a few nights to figure out, because it's easy to confuse it, for me anyway, with the condition I have that is a legacy of a neck injury back in 1987. I went body surfing in very rough surf. It was a storm current in August, I believe it was, of 1987. 12-foot waves flopping straight down at Leo Carrillo Beach. They just would rear up suddenly and come straight down, not even a nice long curl. And I got caught in that, in the undertow. I was going to be carried out to sea, and it was a real mess. So I nearly broke my neck. And it created this legacy of a condition that is very similar to a stroke condition, but with one difference. And that is that when I put the neon bulb in its position, my left arm didn't just hurt and ache, it got cold. And I had this happen to me one other time when I was dealing with my rainmaking tool. I had it connected to Leon Ernest Demon's biocircuit backwards. And it created my legs. The lower half of my body was turning into ice, and the upper half of my body was amassing tension, particularly in the diaphragm area. So I just swapped the connections and everything was fine. So in this instance, I don't think it matters what direction the neon bulb is versus which side the resistor is on, because I tried it without the neon bulb, with just a resistor in this place, and I realized that there shouldn't be any link. And so what I do is, to remind myself that, I put a capacitor in there to ensure that there's no current flow whatsoever between those 2 points, and not just leave it up to the air. I'm accentuating the separation rather than ignoring it, because it's a very important part of the circuit, and you have to make a decision how you want to run the circuit. Do you want to run it asymmetrical, over unity, out of balance to create power, or do you want to run our machines, to run additional appliances in addition to this appliance, or do you just want to create balance, symmetry, for the purposes of a bionic device as a sleep circuit, without any power added to it other than the body and the earth? So not only do I have to turn off the power source, but I have to make sure it's symmetrical and balanced. So what I did was I put a straw, I took a plastic straw and I cut a section, and I took out the neon bulb with its resistor. Here's the neon bulb with its. I had to use aluminum foil to help me make connection because this leg was a little thin. For some reason the clip lead wasn't clipping onto it. Or even just a plain resistor of the same quantity, 100,000. This is 102,000 kiloohms, and this is 100,000 kiloohms. So whether or not I had a resistor alone or a resistor in combination with a neon bulb, I had to take that out and put in a little section of plastic pipe, and I literally connect the two clip leads to the two ends of the plastic pipe to remind myself where the neon bulb is supposed to go, but also to put a capacitor there to ensure that no flow of amperage can possibly travel through that plastic pipe. You know, maybe some other subtle energy goes through, but since it's a petroleum byproduct, plastic, it's probably not even some other form of prana going through. You know, to me, Vijnana is what electricity is, yet there are other pranas that can pass through other substances other than metal. So metal passes Vijnana, which is electricity, but silk passes samana, glass, or probably quartz and silica, passes udana, resin passes prana, and water passes apana. And those are the 5 pranas and the 5 substances which Karl von Reichenbach figured out. And so Vijnana is the one we deal with, electricity. But a petroleum byproduct, I doubt it passes anything, because it's just a rock. You know, it's a derivative of the earth. Actually, now that I think of it, it's a derivative of water and iron oxide and, what's the other one? Calcium carbonate. So actually, we've got water there and we've got iron. So it should be able to pass both electricity and Vijnana and apana, electricity and whatever the phenomenon is for water. But because it's a blend, we use it as our dielectric, as our insulators. So I figure it's pretty safe to have it in there. And I haven't tried it yet, but I had a resistor in there last night, and it literally, and you know, if it doesn't give me stroke, see, the neon bulb created a stroke condition in my left arm, very pronounced. The resistor alone created a mild, you know, no coldness necessarily in my left arm, just mild pain. But I've also been getting headaches. That's the other thing that's been happening, regardless of which one I use. So I'm hoping the straw will eliminate the headaches and eliminate any even hint of a stroke condition in my left arm. And that tells me the circuit is balanced, it's symmetrical, it's unity, and can run in idle mode, merely, without any over-unity capability. I have the load connected, I have it in there. You know, I took out the other 2 that were each one was supposed to balance the toroids with the load, and I just left in the load. So that's why I have these sections cut out of the my diagram. It's my easy way to redraw it, and so now only the load is left there. But I have the capacitor now, and that's my new addition. I have everything else, the diodes. See, now that's, I scribbled out because it's supposed to point upwards, not downwards. That's a mistake there. And the same thing goes for that one. That's supposed to point upwards, not downwards, because it's supposed to point into the magnetic component, not out, not away. So they both point in on both sides. There's my earth ground, and there's my sleep and my earthing bed sheet. So all the parts are in there, the aluminum foil surrounding the toroids. And so the load is my voltage out. And then I got voltage in over here, but I have voltage in combined. Actually, there are two pairs of voltage ins, and they really should be separated. So that's why I have these connections here, these branches. Because you don't want the voltage in that supplies the ground, the earth ground, combined with the voltage in that feeds the toroids. It helped me understand the circuit better to combine them, but technically they really should be separated. So I really should have two power sources here, and I do. I have two battery packs. So that's what I should do. I should redo the circuit to separate the two voltage ins, and then draw up a new version of what I'm actually working on, as opposed to what I dream about, which is a whole other set of diagrams. So I'll redo the diagram, and I'll redo the circuitry to reflect two separate sets of voltage ins and one voltage out. So one voltage in is the idle portion of the circuit, which is the majority of the circuit. And then the other voltage in supplies the portion of the circuit that is the voltage out, which requires Overunity to not drain the battery. Otherwise, both battery packs will be drained. I think that's everything. Yeah. So I still think that the aluminum foil should go underneath the coil windings, not on top of it. That should enhance it. But a dielectric should go between the aluminum foil and the iron core of the toroid. Let's see, because they have to be separated, and the dielectric between the foil and the iron core would represent the earth, the 3 feet of earth spaced between each of the grounding rods that Clarence put in his soil. And then I also have some extra straw pieces I'm going to cut, and I'm going to cover all the diodes, because I have 4 diodes, and they're bare. They're just, and you know, you have to make sure that all your components are insulated from the air, because you don't want anything shorting out, going through the air. Even a mild short you can't see, you know. Short of arcing, just tunneling, ionic tunneling, we don't want that either. So I'm trying to move in that direction to make it look like it would be more or less a permanent circuit, even though I still want to leave myself open for changes, so I'm not making anything permanent at the moment. But I want to make it look that way. I want to move in that direction. I realized, though, I have 2 hubs. You know, when I combine various branches, sometimes it's very similar. It's just 2 wires or a wire and a diode. But sometimes it's a lot of wires, and I'm noticing there's 2 hubs. So here's one hub here, and here's another hub, no, over here. So there's a hub there, and there's a hub there. And it turns out that they're on either side of the leftmost toroid in this diagram. So here's a hub here going to earth ground. That's on the bottom, big A. And then the other hub is down here. Yeah, yeah, because part of it's over here, which goes to the earthing bed sheet. So if you take that connection there and bring it over to here, we have several connections here. And this goes to the little a. So we got big A and we got little a on the left toroid, and that's where my 2 hubs are, where I have a lot of connections. So that's just for your information, just so you know. That's my little a hub, and that's my big A hub, which the little a being the top wire that starts the winding on the left toroid, and the big A hub represents underneath here, represents the bottom wire that starts winding around the toroids. So if I ever got a chance, and I'm sure I will make it happen, To rewind the toroids, of course, I'll put the wire winding on one side, and I'll use magnetic wire instead of 18 gauge wire. Gradually I'll make upgrades to make it more like it's supposed to be. But at the moment I'm saving money to stay with floor flanges, cast iron floor flanges. Because actually, interestingly enough, I looked up ferrite on Wikipedia, and it's very similar to cast iron. It's put in the same department. It's similar. Similar enough that I'm not that far off. And I save money this way by buying a plumbing piece instead of buying a fancy schmancy ferrite core for transformer core for $500 plus, $500 and up. So it's good. $25 versus $500. That's a nice savings, I would think. Obviously, the detail may improve efficiency and improve Overunity. Obviously, if that's what you need. But right now, I'm just trying to get my feet wet, so I'm not looking to spend money. Okay, so now that's enough. One of the prominent features of asymmetry, a circuit having the quality or the characteristic of asymmetry, is the use of brute force. But that brute force is combined with the principle of leverage. So it's a more refined version of brute force, which makes it more efficient, so much so that it becomes Overunity. But we can't get, or I can't get away from how noticeable sleeping on this circuit the use of brute force is. And brute force is only needed when you're trying to take something out of balance. In other words, you're trying to move something, like you're trying to move a boulder. And if you can't just flick it with your pinky, and if you have to use leverage, already that's brute force. You're just going to be so efficient at it that you won't have to get 10 guys to help you. You'll be able to do it yourself with the principle of leverage. But it's still brute force because you have to move the boulder by something other than like breathing on it or staring at it or telling it, move, So there's still brute force involved. It's just not as noticeable because of the principle of leverage being engaged as well as the use of brute force. And to me, the analogy that I just drew may not seem convincing, but it's merely an analogy, and that's why it's kind of imperfect. The experience of sleeping on this circuit is that when it's in the state of balance, there's no brute force because it's in a state of balance. There's no use of any force. See, the use of any force, as far as I'm concerned, is brute force. Exhibits the quality or the characteristic of brute force. And so, brute force is only involved in a status of asymmetry. Even though we can reduce that quotient, so to speak, by the use of leverage, it's still there. And this is pretty obvious to me. So these are two different uses of circuitry: bionic usage versus Overunity usage to supply additional power for our other appliances other than the one that we're running, the Overunity device that we're running. Asymmetry is a totally different animal, and it puts it in a different ballpark. The basis may be the same. The ability to idle, that's a byproduct of symmetry, of balance. But Overunity goes beyond symmetry in the area of asymmetry, imbalance. And so all of our physics is based on the notion of balance. Energy in equals energy out. That's balance. That's symmetry. And that's all very well and good so long as you include the asymmetrical dominance of space, or the complement or the inverted complement to electricity, to an electron, which is an electron hole. There's a far vaster quantity of electron holes in the universe than there are electrons. And it's those very electron holes that can turn into electrons just as electrons can turn back into electron holes. But that's the ambient background of the universe is electron holes. But in our circuits, it tends to be balanced because it wants to be, for some reason, even though outside of our circuits it's not. But I guess it's what it is electron holes can live without electrons, but electrons cannot live without electron holes, because electrons are actually a deviation from the norm. It's not normal. Normalcy is space, nothingness, no electrons. And so when we want to manifest power, that's actually a deviation from normalcy, requiring balance between its original format, which is nothingness, electron holes. So if we want to have the best of both worlds, both the manifestation of power in the form of electrons and a predominance of electron holes, we got to pay extra for it. And we have to pay extra in the form of our skill to make sure the circuit maintains an imbalanced state, which in itself is a contradiction, because maintain implies balance automatically. So we have to use effort, but in a refined way, using the principle of leverage. But it's still extra that we have to do. And that's, I think, the one thing that physics ignores is intelligence. It's so busy looking at the energy aspect of life and the balance that manifest energy requires of itself when it's manifest, and forgets that intelligence has nothing to do with energy directly, but indirectly makes all the difference in being able to create the manifestation of imbalance, to have overunity. So now I can appreciate when Charlie Lutz said, Mother Nature's always trying to put things back into balance, while humankind is always putting things out of balance. No sooner than nature puts it into balance, humans put it out of balance. And I can see why. We want overunity. We want more. We want more of everything. And that's a state of asymmetry, of imbalance, of overunity. This notion of that we have to live by the same rules that nature lives by is bogus. Nature lives by the rules of physics, not human nature, but Mother Nature lives by the rule of balance, namely, energy in must equal energy out when it's manifest energy. Of course, no rule applies when it totally becomes non-manifest. It's just space. It's just electron holes, space filled with electron holes, emptiness. But when nature manifests energy, it has to be always in a state of balance. But when humans monkey with it, we got to have an imbalance. We got to have an extra amount of energy. And that takes intelligence to do that, or what we call artistry, or skillfulness. And that's where the extra energy comes from, is thinking through and research and all the energy we put into figuring out how to make it overunity. So that's where the extra energy comes from, if you really want to balance everything out, is the work of figuring out how to make a device overunity. But just to give you an example, we want to make enough money to get by, but we want a little extra too. And it would be nice if both spouses in the family don't have to work. Just one works. And the other can do other things. And you have enough money to remodel and expand your home and invest in your children's education, 20 years down the line. That's overunity. So it's ridiculous to think that we have to live by the same rules that nature lives by. And we need to create a distinct difference between the two, a demarcation, and understand the difference. Mother Nature lives by the rules of physics, not the human nature. We live by the rule of overunity in our energy, but we do an exchange. So there is a balance. We exchange our intelligence for the extra energy, and that makes up the difference. So in the end, it does balance out. And so I can imagine when the cycles of history go through time and civilizations crumble, there is a dark ages in between. The periods of light and the period of productivity, when cultures excel. But when they lack excellence, we fall into dark ages because we lose our intelligence, and then everything is less than unity, certainly not over unity. So we go through cycles of opposition, of contrast, between something that is so efficient that it's over unity, and periods that it's so inefficient that, we become like slaves, reverting to our animal nature, and we put forth more energy than what we get out of it. And back then we weren't smart enough to argue about perpetual motion machines, so we just suffered so much that our minds were dull from stress, and we lived short lives. So we didn't even argue the argument of perpetual motion and over unity and free energy. We were too dull to do that. But here we are with the situation where we can excel due to the fact that we don't have stress in our lives, and we don't want stress, and we know how to get rid of it and prevent it. So we use our intelligence. We get to exercise our brain for a change and exhibit some intelligence to create over unity and make more money than what we have to spend, so we can put it away for our retirement. That's over unity, so that we can live off of our nest egg and not have to work at all. Isn't that the side effect of over unity? Come on. So humans don't live by the same rule because they convert their intelligence into energy. So it does balance out, but it does not initiate purely as energy in equals energy out. Instead, it's energy plus intelligence equals over unity of energy out. That's the true equation from the human standpoint. We add our intelligence to the equation, so it's not strictly energy in, energy out. It's energy plus intelligence in equals additional over unity of energy out. That's the true way to look at perpetual motion machines. Stanley Meyer was very intelligent. Just because he didn't share all the secrets with us doesn't mean his device did not achieve over unity and do something more than just idle on hydrogen. He made use of ammonia to create asymmetry and be able to accelerate up a hill, because hydrogen will not allow you to accelerate your internal combustion engine up a hill. So no way. All you can do is idle in your driveway, unless you bubble air through your electrolysis chamber and not give credit where credit is due to the nitrogen that reforms into ammonia in small quantity. See, if we don't give credit where credit is due, then we can claim that there is no over unity taking place and just stick with simple analysis. But things tend to get complicated when you want to give credit where credit is due to something more than just idling. So when I sleep at night, I just want to idle the circuit because I want to achieve a state of balance. Then I'll be refreshed when I wake up in the morning. But in the daytime, if I run devices off this same circuit, I have to add in the power components that includes the neon bulb and the two references of grounding, a voltage difference that adds to the circuit, in this case represented by the aluminum foil surrounding the iron core of those toroids, those two toroids. I don't know how much it actually works in this configuration to contribute anything, but just putting the neon bulb in and sleeping, I realize it creates asymmetry, or even just a resistor alone without the neon bulb resistor pair. So I understand now the value of symmetry and balance, and now the role of intelligence and energy in being able to create over unity.